Hello there, and welcome back to Writing from Scratch with me, Tom. On today's video, we're learning how to avoid making a perfect character. As we discussed in the last video, having a perfect character is not interesting for our book. It doesn't provide a person that our reader can attach themselves to and see themselves within. We want to see a character with flaws and weaknesses because it makes the struggle so much more interesting and makes their journey more believable. Just imagine if there was a character who was handsome and charming and charismatic and intelligent and well-kept and rich and successful. None of us would really believe that this person can actually exist. And that's exactly the point. We all understand that we live in a world that is not perfect, and therefore it's impossible for a perfect person to exist within it. So, when we're writing our book, we need to make sure that we're being honest to reality, no matter what genre we're writing. We need to understand that we can't have a perfect character who is good at everything and doesn't have any weaknesses. This is so important for reader enjoyment, for believing the story and feeling the tension and the stakes within it. If everything is perfect and a character can do everything, there's no journey to go on, there's no lesson to learn, and there's no obstacle to be overcome because they can do it all already. At a deeper level, as an audience, we want to be able to relate and connect with that character. It's almost a relief for most of us to see our heroes and heroines struggling, to know that they also have problems just like we do, to know that they fail and have struggles just like we do. Idols in fiction or non-fiction provide examples for us to look up to, knowing that if they can overcome their problems, then maybe we can too. A perfect character doesn't provide this. The final point on why it's so important is because a character's weakness often defines the level of their success. There can be a hesitancy amongst new writers to introduce lots of negative things about their characters, as if they feel that it somehow takes it away. It's not that weaknesses are more important than strengths, but they are important for defining how much a character achieves by the end of their journey. If they have lots of weaknesses at the start, we feel so much more inspired and empowered by them when they overcome them all to succeed. Or maybe when they don't overcome their weaknesses and they still succeed through sheer willpower or determination. It teaches us a really good moral lesson that we can overcome our weaknesses and achieve whatever we want to. So creating a perfect character undermines this philosophy, undermines the moral message that all good storytelling gives us. And that's what we have to keep in mind, and that's why it's so important. So now that we understand why it's so important, how do we go about creating a rounded, three-dimensional character? The first answer should be fairly obvious. First, you need to establish your character's background, as this goes a long way to determining what kind of person they are, though be careful about falling into stereotypes. Not all doctors are rich, and not all priests are kind. Understanding a background is more about showing you what options for traits and skills are likely to have been available for your character. If they don't have a piloting background, it's unlikely that they can fly a plane. Don't give your character skills that they wouldn't have developed in their backstory, and don't give them a backstory where they could have developed all the skills, because that's not possible. Don't be afraid of going down the rabbit hole. The deeper you understand the background of your character, the better. Each piece of their background you build can inform you of more skills and help you build that well-rounded character. The more detail you add here allows you to more closely define your character and the way they'll behave and interact with others. It's important to use this to explore the weaknesses especially. What did they not have? What bad habits or thoughts could they have developed? Is our doctor numb to seeing pain or developed a gambling addiction because they have the money and need to deal with the pressure of their work? These are all things that we can explore with every character's background. So, once you have a background, let's look at the traits they have. Characters need to have positive and negative attributes in a particular balance. But it's not as simple as saying that you just have to list the strengths and weaknesses and voila. More strengths doesn't equal a good character, just as more weaknesses doesn't equal a bad character. These qualities are fluid. They can change over the course of a novel and are employed differently depending on a character's motivation and background. For example, a character could possess the strength of determination. But what are they determined to do? Are they determined to save the world or destroy it? Determination is a strong character trait, but it's not good or bad. We'll discuss motivations in the next video, But when you're designing your character, it's better to select qualities in a neutral mindset and understand that strengths can be diminished and weaknesses can be overcome. Additionally, having weaknesses is a really great thing for character development. You can watch your character grow from being timid into being confident, or being cowardly to brave, and this gives so much satisfaction to the reader, to the character, and to the author to write something like that. So having weaknesses isn't a bad thing. In fact, for storytelling, it's such a great thing. And while a character might start off with weaknesses that maybe we don't like, by the end of the story they can grow out of those in a natural, progressive way. So don't be afraid of the weaknesses, include them. They allow so much flexibility for storytelling. On top of that, it's also important to understand, for the nature of the story, how these character traits end. Now you've got two choices here. If you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are of each character at the beginning of the story, you can either plan what those will turn into by the end. Will they get stronger or weaker? Will they lose strengths or gain weaknesses? Or you can just let it happen organically as you're writing. It really depends on what style of writing you prefer. In general, it's better to plan. That way you know the end point for your character and you know what steps they need to take to change those traits. But it might be more enjoyable for you as an author and for the reader if you let it happen organically, not really planning how a character is going to change over the course of the story. Because hopefully, as things happen to them, they should naturally change anyway. For me, I'd prefer to plan, but it's entirely up to you. It can be useful to think of this like designing a video game character. You can put points into certain attributes, such as intelligence or charisma, but ultimately the player, or the writer in this case, decides if they are used for good or evil. They start with a set of skills based on their background and then embark on a journey that makes them stronger as they gain experience. But that initial selection means certain tasks are more or less difficult. Another point here is that internally, how a character's traits interact with each other is important, and there are obviously some that don't go well together. There's always a trade-off in qualities. Ned Stark from A Song of Ice and Fire was honourable, but that meant he was more naive than others and vulnerable to manipulation. Varys, on the other hand, was deeply manipulating and cunning, but at the cost of constantly looking over his shoulder and not having any honour. Make sure you're noting down the consequences of each feature you select, because this will inform how your character behaves, how others treat them, and therefore allow you to write consistently. A final point before we look at an example is that you shouldn't make other characters weaker in order to make your protagonist or antagonist stronger. It can be tempting to purposely leave flaws in your antagonist for the sake of allowing them to be beaten, or just to make your protagonist appear stronger. This is a really big mistake that some writers fall afoul of. Each character should be an island when being designed, independent of their relationship to others unless it's part of their background. The most interesting interactions ever put to film or paper are between two strong characters who both have strengths that balance one another. Make sure you aren't failing to develop other characters just to advance another. This can be especially difficult if you have a large cast of characters. Stay consistent with how you write, plan your story well, and your reader will be more grateful to read a confrontation or challenge where the outcome isn't immediately obvious due to the imbalance between character strengths. To communicate this to an audience, it's important that the character themselves demonstrates their skill and traits through their thoughts, actions, and words. Let's use an example to illustrate how this can be done. This is from Lee Child's The Killing Floor. "Right," he said. "We got a few questions, don't we?" The voice was deep, like a rumble, not a southern accent. He looked and sounded like a Boston banker, except he was black. "My name is Finley," he said. "My rank is captain. I am chief of this department's detective bureau. I understand you have been apprised for your rights. You have not yet confirmed that you understood them. Before we go any further, we must pursue that preliminary matter." Not a Boston banker, more like a Harvard guy. "I understand my rights," I said. He nodded. "Good," he said. "I'm glad about that. Where's your lawyer?" "I don't need a lawyer," I said. "You're charged with murder," he said. "You need a lawyer. We'll provide one, you know, free of charge. Do you want us to provide one, free of charge?" "No, I don't need a lawyer," I said. From this exchange, we can see many of Jack Reacher's traits demonstrated by his behaviour, words and thoughts. Let's start with his thoughts. The short sentences and deductions show us that he is precise and analytical. He is studious and knowledgeable as he can determine region-specific accents and university backgrounds. We could guess that he perhaps overthinks or maybe jumps to conclusions due to him making a lot of assumptions about somebody he's meeting for the first time. Here we have strengths and weaknesses. As for behaviour, there's no mention of movement or any physical reactions, so we can guess that he's a confident person, no stranger to police stations or high-pressure situations. This is a great example of less is more too, as the absence of words helps us understand who he is. As for dialogue, he is direct and clear. He is assertive in his positions and confident about what he wants, not using a single word more than necessary. We can assume he has a strong will because of this, is determined and efficient, but perhaps keeps people at a distance and struggles to form intimate relationships. So this example provides a great demonstration of how you can show a variety of character traits in such a short space of writing. The way Jack speaks, the length of sentences, and the manner of his thoughts, the way he conducts himself and his physical reactions all tell us about his character. None of this is being directly told, but shown to us, the reader, and using less is more shows us some of Jack's key characteristics too. If you were to learn that his background was as a military investigator with a military family, then we wouldn't be surprised to find any of these attributes that we've identified. And over the course of the book, he utilises those analytical skills and physical confidence to great effect, while also struggling to maintain amicable relationships due to his strong will and stoic nature. Importantly, all of this is established in the first 2 chapters, so the reader understands who they are dealing with. Introducing the core aspects of your character early is so important to invest your reader and familiarise themselves with who they're following. As we discussed in the first chapter video, it's essential that we're introducing our protagonist to the reader straight away, with their strengths shown and at least implying their weaknesses, although those can be exposed later if we need to. Backgrounds can also be revealed over time, but traits need to be immediate. We should also quickly look at a piece of perfect characterization, as in, it's not good. This doesn't occur often in publishing due to how rigorous the industry is, but it can occur in films and TV due to the limited duration they have to develop a character properly and show all of their skills and development. Let's quickly look at Rey from Star Wars as a character who is not well-rounded. Her background is an orphan who is abandoned by her parents and sold to local crime bosses to salvage junk. We could reasonably expect that she should be emotionally hard, resentful, maybe even skeptical of trusting others. Having grown up in a harsh environment and wishing to escape, surrounded by other hard people, she could be opportunistic and calculating. As for skills, we could guess that she has some basic skills in engineering and resourcefulness, but other than that, her background and location don't seem great for learning more. All of this is reasonable and creates quite a unique and nuanced character whose journey we would be interested to follow. Instead, what we get is a person who is kind, trusting, smart, noble and brave, and completely honest. She is able to pilot a starship with no practice and even outmaneuver experienced pilots. She is able to shoot perfectly against trained soldiers, use a lightsaber without training, even defeating an experienced fighter. She can use force powers without any effort or training. We are not given any reason to believe that she had developed or was born with these skills and attributes. And most of all, there are no identifiable weaknesses that aren't easily overcome. As an audience, it can be hard to connect with such a character because we don't see ourselves in them. We can't imagine ourselves doing all the feats that she achieves within the same level of effort or such a difficult background. So the takeaway from all of this is that you need to put effort into developing your character's backgrounds, their traits, their abilities, and their weaknesses. You need to understand that no character should be perfect, and if they are, it completely disconnects the reader from the experience. Characters need to have flaws. They can have virtues too, but they must have vices. In the next video, we're going to explore how motivations also come into play in how we can utilize and use and demonstrate these strengths and weaknesses. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video, and good luck with developing your non-perfect characters. Please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video with your friends, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.